There we go. So this is the Birds of a Feather session on NFS test. I can start off by saying I've added a workflow to KDevOps for running NFS test. I don't remember if I CC'd you, Jorge, on that. It's actually in KDevOps now. It's not complete. It's missing the subtests that need a second client because I have to build the Ansible infrastructure that brings up a second client and makes it so that it can be connected to without a password.
Actually,
that shouldn't be hard.
Yeah, actually, the second client is kind of not good because you need to run it on a system where you could capture the traffic on both clients, right? So usually on my environment, I run VMware, and I run both clients in the same VMware, but that's the only thing. But what I did after that, instead of using a second client, like delegations, in order to recall a delegation, I just do a second mount with a different version of NFS. So that basically, that's what triggers. So basically, you don't need a second client for any of those tests.
Is that in 3.2?
Yes.
Okay, because with KDevOps, it's usually wise to choose a fairly stable version of the test suite. So I picked 3.2 because it seemed like the latest stable one, but it is kind of old, and I just wanted to check in on that.
Yeah.
Maybe we can exchange some information offline about how I can set those up. Because if I don't have to set up a second client, that'd be super.
I think that's that's the best, because there's a lot of complications when using a second client, because then I have to synchronize both packet traces, and that's a pain. So I never got a chance to do it. So as I said, only if you run it on a system where both your clients can actually, you run TCP dump on one client, and it will actually get the traffic for both clients, then that will be fine. But other than that,
we're running under libvirt, so both of the clients would run on the same hypervisor. Okay. So I don't think that's beyond the pale, but if there's an easier way to do it with a single client, I'd be happy to start there, and then we can add the delegation and attribute cache tests. I think those are really valuable to include in the test suite. Okay. So, okay, go ahead, Olga.
Right. So I just wanted to bring up that not needing the second client only works if your server supports all the versions of NFS. So if there are servers that only support 4.1 and plus, then that doesn't work.
Right.
So
because 4.1 and 4.2, they'll bank the same client, right? So that's not going to work. So you have at least to have 4.1 and then 4.0 as well. But yeah.
So depending on what kind of server you want to test, and its its capabilities.
In this case, it would be NFSD.
Yes, now, then you're good, right?
So do the attribute cache tests work for NFSv3? I thought they did.
That one, you're talking about nfstest cache, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, that one I haven't really touched it in a long time. That was one of the first scripts that I wrote, and I based it off the V3, but you get different results with V4, right? So that one I haven't really fixed any of the issues related with V3, V4 differences. So that one I really haven't, and since it takes a long time to run, I haven't really run it for a long time.
So it's interesting to note that I set this up, and I think Scott hates this feature, but I set this up so that each of the subtests run in their own virtual machine, so they can all run in parallel, assuming that the hypervisor has enough resources. So the whole thing takes only as long as the longest running subtest.
Okay, all right.
Wait a minute. So you have each test running in their own VM?
Yeah, so like the NFS test ALEC runs in one,
Right.
NFS the DIO runs in one, NFS test POSIX runs in one, underscore lock runs in one, sparse, and SSC. So
Wow.
yeah,
That's cool.
so they all start up at the same time. If you select them all, I mean, you can pick which ones you want to run. That doesn't, you don't have to run all of them. So you pick
also,
which ones you run, and it will start them all up in parallel and run them
right.
together.
The only problem with that is that some of the tests, especially like the allocate test, some of the tests, the allog 06 and the allog 06, they actually allocate the whole volume for one of the tests in order to make sure that you actually write to the allocated area.
I think we're allocating a separate export for each test.
Okay, good. That should work. Yes, because that's
If
going to
not,
be
then I will
different, yeah.
change it to do that.
Yeah. Then the other test will fail with Eno space, right? So that's the problem we're running concurrently.
Yeah, Chuck, my qualms with that were before I actually tried the tests. I haven't had any problems with it. So yeah,
Okay.
it's great. It runs pretty quick when they're running in parallel.
Yeah, unfortunately, on my systems, I can't seem to start more than 2 guests because when I do that, they don't reboot. They reboot and they stop at there's some sort of system D thing, and it's asked me for the root password, and I got to look into it. I don't know what the problem is, but I mean, I've got a 24 core system with 256 gig of RAM on it. I should be able to run like 5 or 6 of those guests at once, and it won't. It's just completely unreliable.
Yeah, that's weird. Yeah, I'm spinning up. I mean, on the previous system I was running had 256 gigs, and I was able to spin up like a dozen or 2 guests before I'd see any problems. So, and now
Yeah,
I guess maybe
it came slow though. It became very slow though when you did that. You're talking
well,
about FSVM, right?
Because that system was also running non-KDevOps VMs too. And some of them were running using a lot of resources. So when I would just keep throwing more and more at it, eventually I was hitting the OOM killer. Yeah. That wasn't just KDevOps that was running on that host.
So Jorge, do you have any new subtests in mind, or are you about tested out?
No, it's still work in progress. Right now, currently, I'm working on adding a new test for the extended attributes. You know, there were a couple of issues with extended attributes, the max count, and there was a crash on the client. So trying to come up with the different tests in order to actually test those regressions, just for regression testing. The only problem that I haven't really checked it in because I had a lot of problems with the setup, trying to come up with a better way to do the setup because there's a lot of different tests that require different files with different extended attributes, like the different name and something like that. So it's really hard to make it all fit and make it more generalized in order to reuse that code into the other tests as well. Trying to do it right this time because I did it. I have to rewrite the whole, not rewrite the whole thing, but rewrite most of the setup to do it. But with the new test, still I need to keep on rewriting the setup. I need to rewrite the setup again.
So you're talking about part of the NFS test library, or are you talking about setup.py?
No, the setup for the actual test. So basically just the script. Yeah, the setup for the particular test.
So you're saying there's going to be a new version being posted?
Yes.
Okay.
Hopefully pretty soon, but it's just I've been so busy with some other stuff that I get pulled different directions, and but I have to do it because it's just been sitting there. The changes, I have the tests, and right now I'm running the new versions of Xadder against all the different servers, but I still have to clean it up. I mean, it's just the code is ugly, so I still have to clean it up and come up with a better way to do the setup for that test.
Well, I mentioned setup.py because KDevOps runs on as many Linux families and distributions as possible, and the Python environment on all of them is different.
Yeah, that's a problem, right? I had some problems because I started this with Python 2.7, and then I moved to Python 3, and then Python 3.6, and then suddenly RHEL started using 3.9, and then now 3.11 with Fedora. So it's like every time they move to a different Python version, they're just like, okay, we're deprecating these modules, and this is the way we're doing it. I wanted to, since I don't have any modules that depend on the Python version, because it's just a standalone, right? You can just install it, it should work. But the thing is that every time there's a new Python release coming up, it's like, seems like they're deprecating one of the libraries that I'm using, and then I have to go back and try. And the thing that you had, right? I thought it was a deprecation of that module, but what it turns out to be was just the way to install it instead. I mean, you used to install the modules with using the Python setup.install, right? But now you have to do the pip install on that directory.
Even that's not universally supported.
Exactly. So it's like, yeah, it's a pain. But with different releases of the kernel or different Python releases, you have to do something different. So yeah, that's a pain.
Okay. I think
Ansible has some stuff that is supposed to help smooth over some of these differences. I don't know how good their Python smoothing is, but it might be worth looking into. I think it has some stuff that maybe you can do, like package installs in some cases, but pip installs in others, that kind of thing, or whatever you need. Might be possible.
Yeah.
Actually, I recently got bit by a change. So this is kind of getting into an aside, but KDevOps, when it does pip install, it does it as root, which is generally frowned upon, because in the past, pip install could conflict with the with the distro provided Python packages. But the issue that I ran into with Fedora 40, so when you pip install as root, it installs the packages to user local. And when I log in as a normal user and I look at my path for Python, it doesn't pick up user local. So there was some libraries that were needed for KDevOps that it just wasn't finding. And, so KDevOps, like when it tries to install them, then it runs the Ansible playbooks and it runs them as root. So it says, well, this package is already installed. But then when I actually run the tests, it's not finding them because the location where they were installed wasn't. And I don't know if that's a bug in Fedora or if that's intentional or what. I was trying to track it down and I wasn't really making any progress.
So one thing that might help nfstest test is, have you considered using virtual environments?
No, I haven't really tried that. So right now,
what would be the point? Yeah. What would be the point of virtual environments that maintain the versions of Python?
I'm not sure. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Well,
nor do I. So we're good.
So when you use a virtual environment, because I actually use them for BuildBot and stuff, it basically creates. It's like a root. And so when you install, so when you create a virtual environment, it basically creates some helper scripts that will, like, quote unquote, activate the virtual environment. And it basically adjusts your paths and stuff so that, that's your library path. And then if you do a pip install, it installs it within that directory hierarchy. So you're not kind of polluting the whole, the global installation. So yeah, that's kind of the idea behind pip, or behind virtual environments.
So on one of the distros I was testing on, I tried using, I guess, pip as we had thought we were going to go with, and it said we don't do that anywhere. We mentioned here the reasons why that's not a good idea. That usually it's pip install will put something in on the system that conflicts with the distro packaging. But it then went on to suggest using VN, and maybe if that works everywhere, that would be a nice thing for us. Then we can just install the NFS test in a virtual environment, and hopefully that would help it install and run everywhere and using the same recipe.
Yeah, because that definitely could be a problem, right? Because I took not good care, but I tried to make the name conflicts. Not since I started it when I was using the regular Python setup. Of course, it installed everything on the Python release for the machine, right, for the bugs. But the problem was that I have to make sure that all the names, on the bin directory, I installed the NFS test, alloc, and PNFS and all that. So that's why I put the NFS test, just to make sure that it was just the names will not conflict, right? But yeah, I mean, it could conflict with somebody else that has the packet directory or something. So definitely, that's not a good idea to install it on the main Python branch.
And actually, as far as I know, like even if you're using virtual environments, like you could set up a virtual environment and still clone your NFS test repo. It doesn't need to be done within that virtual environment tree. Like it could be outside of that tree, and then you can still run it. I think. Now I would need to go back and test it, because you do when you're running it out of Git, you set your Python path. So maybe it doesn't work with this, but with the stuff I've been using, like the virtual environment is literally just like for your library packages and stuff. And like everything else that I've been running is sitting outside of that directory structure, and everything I've been doing has worked fine. I haven't tested it with NFS test yet, though.
Just curious, thinking out of the box and not knowing what I'm talking about. As Chuck says, containers. Could containers help in this situation at all? If you put whip up a container and have the right things to do, is that something?
Well, that's exactly what KDevOps does. It's not a container though; it's a virtual guest.
But I'm saying, would containers make it easier?
No. Because the point a container runs the same kernel version as the hypervisor. The point of KDevOps is to test different kernel versions. So we can't do this in a container. We have to use a whole guest.
I got you. Thank you.
But that solves the same problem in that, every time you run KDevOps, it basically has to bring up the guest with a Fedora 39 pristine image and then load down all the packages that it needs, and then it does a build of the whatever test you're doing, like fstest or nfstest or whatever, and then there's a separate step where you go, okay, now run it. Just to give you an idea of how all this flows together.
So the answer is no.
The answer is we thought of that and we do something very container-like, but we have different requirements. So a container, specifically speaking, containers won't work.
Right. Fair enough.
Anybody else have topics you'd like to discuss? Rocks you'd like to throw? Rotten fruit?
Here's a totally off the subject, going off the deep end. Is there a need for another face-to-face or a continued face-to-face Bakeathon? I have two places we could land.
I would prefer not to. I would prefer to postpone that discussion. This is not the right forum for that.
I know, but I got everybody who generally comes. I was thinking, to throw it out there, but yeah, and this is our last meeting.
I think we need to announce that topic more broadly so the people who want to attend that and discuss that topic can do that. But the people who are in this room right now are the folks who want to talk about NFS tests. So, and that's it might look like it's mostly the same folks. Maybe it is. I don't know, but I'd rather see us make a public announcement that here we're going to talk about this.
But so there's a need. I guess that's my question.
I think only Red Hat sees a need. Everybody else, when this topic comes up, goes, "Why are we asking this question again?"
Because that's me.
I mean, Ben explained it pretty well last time I made that whine, but I feel like we are gazing at that navel every time we get together, and every time we get together, the answer is let's do another one. Go ahead, Tigran.
So I have two things. So the one is, well, I sit 6 hours ahead of you, which makes really hard to sit the nights, because during the day I cannot really convince my boss that I'm do nothing because I will work at night. This is one issue. But parallel, we have kind of money shortage, so the traveling to US will be the big problem. And another thing is the guy who is developing Windows client currently, who picked the work with the Olga did. Because the environment do not allow us to have a VMs inside the company which talks to outside. And if you can easily spawn Linux VM somewhere, Windows VM I think is more complicated. And that's why he can, because I offered him that he can kind of connect to VPN during the day if he cannot work at the night, and then at least we can communicate with each other, because kind of de facto he sends the Windows packages or patches to me, and I just merge them and push them to GitHub. But he cannot connect because his company do not allow to have a external VPN. And well, the others solve this problem somehow, but for them it's really probably issue. I'm not saying that well, I like to meet you in person, but some testing can happen without. But there's some issue which well, we cannot drink beer at least. It doesn't work the same way as in person. So maybe not every year, but maybe every second year will be nice to have a in-person event.
I will take Chuck's advice and I'll throw it on the list and see what comes back, because we can do it in RDU in Raleigh, or I think we do it in Boston. I'm going down to Boston next week to check it out, but Boston is really much more expensive than Raleigh is, or Westford. So, all right, I'll throw it out there. Chuck, thank you. No problem.
So steering it back to NFS test, maybe it's just me, something I'd like to see would just be like an annotated config file, like a sample, maybe stating what the defaults are, because and this is probably my fault because I haven't run the test as much as I should, which is going to change now, obviously, now that it's in KDevOps. But I feel like if I want to override certain options, I have to dig through the source and find them, figure out what the options are and stuff. A good example is like if I want to override where the logs get written and stuff, you know, just having that in a config file that is kind of annotated might be helpful.
Yeah, there's the option like the -H for help or --help, that it will give you all the different tests that it will run, the descriptions of every test, and also each of the options. But yeah, you're right. There's every time, like here at the Bakeathon, right? So I have to set up. I usually have my config file, which I have like my temp there, which that's where it's going to create all the packet traces, the log files, and that. I'll change it to my home /logs directory. Those things, I have that NFS test on my home directory that has all those extra options. There are some options like on the POSIX. I mean, the open, it does like 10,000 different opens, and it takes really long time, right? In comparison with the rest of the tests, that I usually don't run that test at the Bakeathon, because it's just going to take for, especially talking to a server like in New York or somewhere else, right? It's just going to take forever. So I usually don't run that one. There's options to do that. So I usually have my config file for those to change the default options, right? I did change most of the default options for the verbosity level of the logs because I usually had it like to nothing. So I always have to set up the verbose level. But I did change it for all the tests to, if you run it like that, then you will actually do the right thing, right? So it's going to give you most of the data that you need on the log files. And the other thing that I'm working like on the Bakeathon is still work in progress is that every time I run to a different server, right, I try to run the whole NFS test, all the tests to make sure. I mean, some of the tests will run because the server doesn't have certain capabilities, right? Like extended attributes or PNFS and like that. So I always just struggle like that because sometimes it will take forever to run, especially on some servers that they don't support NFS v3. And every mount, it will took like 5-10 minutes just to time out. So imagine the test that is just going to keep on mounting that same version and it doesn't fail, right? That's part of the script as well that I should just die and say, you know, this version doesn't mount and that's it, just get out. But,
yeah, like if something returned like op not supported, like for allocate, if
right.
you could just bail out and
Bail
not try to run the rest of the test, that would be super cool too.
Right. So I'm working on a script that just pokes the server for server capabilities. So it will give me like a report says, okay, this server supports extended attributes, read delegations, write delegations that it's not supported, and so forth. So that will, and also I have a script that I need to actually check in those things into the main branch that just runs like run NFS tests, that it will run all the tests according to a config file for that server, right? So it will only run this test specifically designed for that server. So it's not going to run the whole thing. So I think that's much better way to do it. But yeah, definitely I have to include those. Still, it's, as I said, it's still work in progress, but I can actually check it in just so you guys could have it and give it a try.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
And what else? Yeah, and the other thing is like, you know, for example, PNFS, it only supports files layout because that's what NetApp, that's the one. But it seems like most servers now, they support flex files, or now they're starting to support some other the blocks, right? Or is it the blocks that you guys are testing right now?
SCSI.
SCSI. So yeah, but it only supports files layout. I did change a few of the scripts in order to at least not crash the script, right? At least fail gracefully if it is a different than files layout, and try to at least run it so I can actually have the packet trace and actually it could come up with some different type of errors, even though that the test will actually fail, give you a lot of failures because it is not a files layout type, but still I ran it just in case I could find something on the packet traces.
So there is an extension to the block SCSI layout type that was just published, which lets the client access the storage via NVMe, NVMe Fabrics protocols. So that's in the pipeline, and I'm not aware of any implementations of it yet. It was just published. The RFC was published like just a few weeks ago. So having the ability to expand the layout type support in NFS test would be awesome.
Yeah, also the PNFS, talking about PNFS, it only supports one layout segment. You know, when the layout gets returned, you could have multiple segments. So right now it only supports the first segment, and it doesn't support partial layouts as well. So there's still a lot of work on some of the scripts, and basically I just tried to come up with a script that actually tests most of the capabilities for the current client or the current server that I was testing. But yeah, it definitely is just the kernel is moving so fast for both the client or the servers that I cannot keep up with so many changes. But the good thing is that it's a framework. I mean, I know that Python already has like PyTest. This one is an entirely new, pretty much everything, right? I did everything from scratch. The packet trace module, instead of using the XDR-lib that was already on Python, I just wrote my own and the test environment and everything instead of using PyTest. But I think it's pretty simple to use, I guess, in order to do different tests that you wanna create for a very specific test that you can actually look at the packets to see what they're doing and all that. It's just should be not hard enough to add more tests to it.
Yeah, I understand that XDR-lib is going away.
So yeah, I heard when you were guys talking about the PyNFS, and yeah, I don't know. Is there something else in Python that actually does the XDR decoding?
Do you know?
Not that I'm aware of, but I haven't Google searched it too much yet, beyond just
Okay.
seeing the announcement that they were removing it.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the where they talked about deprecating it, the justification was there's nothing using it. So
Okay.
now, like, I mean, is the Python license, is that GPL compatible? Could we just copy that file out? And because as far as I know, it's just one file that has the XDR stuff.
I think I am. Yeah, I don't know.
Where would you put it? Where would you put the file?
I mean,
I think we would
would
check it into the PyNFS source tree.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, bye, Jeff.
Have a good weekend.
What else? Yeah, just the problem that we're moving so fast on the different kernels and some of the things that I'm trying to support really old kernels like RHEL 8. So they're so different, right? They have different versions of Python, and it's getting harder to keep track of that because the new
Why
stuff.
Why for backwards compatibility, or is it why? I mean, that's,
No, because I just I don't wanna have on the scripts that say, if this is a kernel, if this is an old kernel, then this kernel behave this way, right? I try to do that with nfstest like DIO, DirectIO, that it's been changing so fast that I have to pass everything, right? Because I don't know which kernel is coming from. So, and that's a problem, right? That you can miss some of the some bugs because of that, right? If you try to make it like really old kernels did it this way, now new kernels does it this way, then you won't be able to fail many things because of that. You have a broader range of the behavior for the client or the server, right? So that's the hardest part. And then I don't want to just say, I'm just gonna support like newer kernels. And if you run it on RHEL 8, then everything starts to fail because there's a lot of differences, right? So it's like I have to set up a trade-off between those two things. So, and that makes it a lot more complex, the code, because it's just okay. If I've seen at some point, the other thing that usually kills me is NFS error delays. I mean, sometimes if I'm expecting a packet sent to the server and then coming back, I usually don't take care of the NFS error delay, and then I get a failure, right? Because I say, okay, so this failed. So, and of course, every packet could error out with that delay, and but yeah, it's hard to check like for every packet. Say okay, if it is a delay, then I have to look for it again and so forth. It just makes it a lot more complicated. Some of those things are I ended up with some failures that if you look at the packet trace, they are not actually failures, but the script is just not looking into those inconsistencies between these different environments.
Olga, yeah.
Hey, hooray. I think support for TLS, right, is on
It's on the table, yes.
It's on the table, right? So I think it's one of those things that we wanted to add. Yeah, the support for TLS and also support for trunking.
Yes, that's the other thing. The trunking right now, some of the scripts, they use a strict when I'm searching for packets against a different server. Say I'm looking for a read. Most likely, if it is a PNFS, right? So if I'm looking for a read packet to the DS1, then I'm looking for a specific IP address. But with trunking, it's completely different, right? So all those tests are going to fail because of that. And some other tests, like the direct IO, I'm just looking for a read. I do care about if it is going to the MDS or DS, but I think it's more forgiving than like the PNFS script. So yeah, that's another issue that I started looking into it. Is just the major changes for it. So yeah, so trunking is one that requires a lot of changes. The other is, as Olga said, TLS. I did some stuff with the Wireshark for TLS, so I know pretty much what I need to do with NFS test, but I don't know if I could get the crypt libraries to work with NFS test, right? So yeah, that's a pain because I mean Kerberos, I have Kerberos, but for some of the scripts that actually look into the packets like PNFS and like that, I don't support Kerberos KRB5P because I cannot decode it, right? So it's basically the same thing with TLS. So with TLS, I won't be able to support it unless I added the extra layer that actually decrypts the TLS layer. And yeah, so but that's the pipeline, but it's just yeah.
And would that be a good idea to be able to have a tool that decrypts things that are supposed to stay crypted?
Well, it's like
Wireshark,
right? So on Wireshark, right. What you do is just enter the keys, right? For your session, and then you'll be able to see the NFS packets within the TLS, right? And for NFS test, it should be the same thing. You just need to specify the keys files, and that should work. But yeah, trying to make it work, that's that's still, I haven't looked into it yet, but yeah, it's gonna be kind of hard to do that. But yeah, it's on the pipeline.
Do you have a plan for releasing a new dot release?
Yes, yes, pretty soon. As soon as I get the new Xatters test, the extended attributes test, then I'll release that new release.
Don't we have something for Read Plus?
Oh, that's the other thing. That's right. I think I checked. I need to run it with the upstream kernel just to make sure that whenever I'm looking for reads, then I have to include the read plus, and then I have to make an if statement, right? Like a fork. Let's say, if it is read plus, the information is different on the packet than on read. I tried to do it on the packet module trace to make it pretty much match what the read and read plus, but still there's still I have to make it work right for both. So yeah, but that's something that I have to, and I think that's more pressing, right? Because the most that's easier change to do it, and since I already read plus, it's configured on the upstream kernel, then that's what I need to do first. So yeah, a lot of things to do still on this.
How can we help?
I mean, I have received changes from different people, but just very few changes. So whatever, if you see something that it's not running, if you can debug it or something, and you can send me a fix, I'm glad to see it. I usually don't look at I remember getting patches on the list, but I sometimes miss those things because I don't check the list that often, right? The emails from the list that often. So if you can CC me directly, then I'll be happy to answer in a timely manner instead of just let it loose. I think I got a Tigran one patch from Tigran like a couple of years ago that I missed completely for a few months, and then in a Bakeathon, I think he reminded me that he sent it and then I put it in. But yeah, so sometimes I just miss those things.
Welcome to my world. Miss them all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, but I have received some patches from different people in the past. So, but yeah, I mean, just testing. I mean, if you have a new feature for the kernel, I think I can give you pointers on how to write your own tests, how to start small, and then I mean, I cannot promise you that I'm gonna help out on writing the tests, for example, for like flex files, right? Because since I work for NetApp and my time is not my time, so I cannot just start working on something that is not related to NetApp for the most part. But on my free time, I can at least review those things and give pointers to how to create your own tests and all that. And start small. I mean, it's just I've written some tests that requires like, okay, we need to make this bug fix or check for this fix. Then how do we test it? And the scripts are not that hard. I guess it's not just printing the packet trace, and then you can actually get it from there, and get the right look at the other different scripts, and yeah, start from there. I mean, but yeah, if you have a different feature that you want to add, just create your own script, and I'll be glad to put it in.
We could do this offline, but I just posted the wiki, and since I brought it up in the last meeting, and see how accurate that is. And
yeah,
I will be willing to to offload you on making it more accurate, so we can point people to it. Is the goal.
Yeah, I try to keep it up to date, but I mean, at least the releases, right? Which is the one, the 3.2.
Right. Yeah, it's the last. I noticed that. Yeah. And that's the one in Fedora. And I just noticed that's the one in Fedora as well.
Yeah.
So, but just don't do it now. No, I'm just saying, that's what's out there, and send me the changes, or I'll offload that for you to make the changes.
Yeah.
Because I think we really should start pointing people back to that. And
I still have to make a lot of changes to that, because that's really all right. But at least I try to keep the download stuff up to date.
Yes.
Yeah. And I need to update the installation, to use the pip install instead of for newer machines.
In your copious spare time, of course.
Right.
So what's your favorite distribution in your lab, Jorge? I mean, you RHEL based or Fedora or
Yeah, I basically just I do testing a lot on RHEL, the nightly builds. Right now I'm just testing RHEL 8.10 and 9.4. Sometimes I just test the upstream kernel, but that's not very often as I wish. But yeah, mostly RHEL.
Yeah,
We
so
tried to do it with different releases like Suzy, but yeah, that's too much. The matrix is getting too big, especially with sys, Kerberos, RDMA, and all those things, IDMA, iWarp, and Rocky, and man, it's just too much testing. I mean, there's so many variants of it that.
well, that's an organizational problem that KDevOps is attempting to help with, in the sense that it's a tool that upstream developers can run on the kernels that we care the most about. I mean, we don't care about a specific distro's kernel, because they're all different. But at least we could do some more robust testing of the upstream kernels before we release them. So, you might be relieved of having to test the upstream kernels. You're just by yourself, and hopefully we're going to be doing that a lot more now. We're going to be doing it on a more regular basis. I think the same question applies to NFS tests that applied yesterday to XFS tests, and that's where we collecting test results and trends and history. I don't think we have an answer for that. There's an infrastructure that's as evolved as it is for, say, XFS tests. So maybe that's something we should think about as a community.
Right. Actually, one of the changes that I got from Tigran was the output to XML. So, I mean, I haven't checked it lately. It should still work, I guess. I haven't really tried it. There's an option for it. I was going to add an option to get the results on HTML, but I think XML should work just fine.
But this is what I have added. This is XUnit report, which is standard and it pick up a lot of tools.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess I need to interact with you, Tigran, to understand how to set that up for NFS test in KDevOps so that we can generate those results and archive them properly.
Yeah, I think there's just an option that I think is a report, XUnit report -report, and then the file where to report it. Yeah. So yeah, if you do for any script that if you do the -h or -help, you get all the different.
I saw the option and turned it on once, and it didn't do anything I noticed or recognized. I guess I didn't know where to look for the file. So
yeah, I'll try it and see what happens, because yeah, I haven't run it for a long time. So yeah. But yeah.
Okay.
I guess I want to push back on one thing. Focusing on distro kernels, or does that make? I think you should maybe focus on upstream kernel, because everything drips down, right? Because RHEL, you find a bug in RHEL, it's going to take 300 years to get the damn thing fixed, with all due respect. Or Fedora, or like Rawhide. I mean, focusing on later and greater kernels, I think finding the bugs early, like exactly what we're trying to do right now, is what connectathons and Bakeathons are about. Maybe you might want to focus on Rawhide or the latest and greatest of other ones, because then we find them, we can fix those.
Yeah, Steve, but I mean, so the way that we operate, right? So Anna does the upstream testing, with her tests, but NetApp internally, for QA runs RHEL, and so they need us to debug RHEL, and so that's why we focus on RHEL.
Okay, I got you. Okay.
It's all about the dollar signs, dude.
Yep, we
yeah, I guess so.
Whatever we're told, we do. Yes.
I guess so.
I've made the same argument when I worked at NetApp, Lowlease, many years ago. I made the same argument because I guess at that time they wanted to test upstream, and I was like, Yeah, but the customers don't run upstream; they run distro kernels. So those are the kernels that need to work for them.
Okay.
So
And-
yeah, you can make the argument both ways, I think.
So we try to do
Tigran?
both.
Oh,
Yeah, Tigran. Yeah.
Yeah, I think both are have their own value, and sometimes there is a substantial intersection between those two. But they're different efforts. Agreed.
Except, sorry, Tigran. Except, yes, we are unfortunately, so Anna has her tests. We don't do NFS tests on upstream, and we don't really do XFS tests on RHEL, you know, because they're both extensive, and you know, and folks don't have time. And I jump between the two. I sometimes run NFS tests on upstream and XFS on RHEL, you know, and you know, jump. Yeah, wherever I have time. Sorry.
Yeah, everything is correct. So we need definitely both, because if there's something sneaks in, it sneaks through upstream, but at the end on a production system, we run RHEL. So nowadays we run RHEL. So you force us to pay. So we run RHEL now. And we want to that not only upstream works, but whatever is in our production system works. And I think with the CentOS stream, we might even get the possibility to test this RHEL kernels before they land on our production systems. Because from my experience, I know if you find something in upstream, it takes extremely long time, so a couple of years, until it gets into, well, if it's not the real so kernel panic and then Ben picks it up immediately, then we just have to wait until next major RHEL release until we'll get it on our production system.
Yeah. So I feel like doing the work that we're doing on KDevOps is absolutely critical to bolstering the upstream testing and making sure that we have a broad array of tests, because there, as I said yesterday, there are a lot of testing gaps upstream. So, you know, there's nothing I can disagree with about you know, improving our upstream testing story. I think it's very important.
And also the other thing that I did a few years ago, many years ago, that I used to run like coverage kernels, enabled coverage on it, and then run the tests, and it had a list of what the percentage of that kernel code was actually exercised by those tests. So I don't know if that's helpful to anybody, but I think
that's on my list. So I do maintain a to-do list for the NFS server, and it's fair. It's kind of semi-public. It's not broadly published, just because I don't want a lot of crazy people coming in and saying, "Why aren't you giving us alternate ports on referrals and stuff like that?" I think some of you know what I'm talking about there. But on that list is a number of places where we have noticed very clear testing gaps, and one of the items on that list is, yeah, we want to enable KCOV and run our tests, all of our tests with KCOV enabled, so that we can see what code paths we're missing. I mean, obviously a lot of error paths and a lot of memory allocation failures and stuff like that is expected, but I'm sure we're going to get some surprises there. Yes, Tigran.
By the way, talk about the referrals. So they forced me to re-implement referrals on our server because they use it for testing, and I think in my test it fails with the Linux client. So I promised Olga to set the server that will exercise it, but I didn't have a time to do it. So eventually I will come back to this. I think client sends empty file handle when it gets a referral. So this is the question was.
I already forget what you're talking about. But
okay,
yes.
So the question is there any testing which tests this part, or is just we did it 10 years ago in a city, and then since then we never? Okay.
You're talking about alternate ports?
No. So I don't know why they need the referrals, but they was bugging me to implement it on our server, and then when I started testing it myself, I discovered that doesn't work, and then the question was where it's broken.
Okay, I think they need it for the Windows client that they're using, the city Windows client.
Right. So do very weird stuff actually. So
I don't remember
this is-
doing referrals in the Windows client, but
They might have added it.
So I think they want to add it.
I know we
Because
put it
they-
into NFS Shootles. I know it's in NFS Shootles, and we got some noise about it not working.
It's not
as
just
well.
referrals. They need referrals to work to servers that are listening on a non-2049 port. I mean, the regular referrals work fine. The alternate port stuff is like, nobody's ever asked that for us before. And so they're giving us all the shit about, why is this working? It's like, nobody's asked us to make it work. So.
And it's not like you can't use like universal address format and specify it. It won't even work that way.
It will. You can stick that in XT exports. And it works for IPv4. It does not work for v6, of course, because of the colons. But yeah, it works for v4. I demonstrated that, and I haven't heard a peep from them since, and so I assume that they were using it. But
Yeah, that's also another issue that Olga found yesterday about running against Hammerspace. The PNFS is IPv4, the MDS, but it returns DS with IPv6. So of course, nfstest just failed, right? So I only got the IPv4. So I did a workaround for it, but it's still, I have to figure out how to make it work with both IPv4 and IPv6 at the same time. And issues like that just comes up like at every Bakeathon. We always, okay, so I missed this one, so I have to go back. And the other thing that nfstest, I tried to do it for every script, like negative testing. Mostly nfstest was designed for protocol level compliance, right? Or pretty much that, but a lot of negative testing, I think. I tried to do it, but yeah, it's still missing a lot of negative testing. Error condition, limit conditions, all those things, try to add them to the newest, for example, the extended attributes, but yeah, still a few things that are missing.
So you just reminded me, someone suggested that we should add the Connectathon suite to KDevOps. And it seems like it's a little on the obsolete side. And I thought that the mission of nfstest was to replace the interop testing capabilities of Connectathon. So if we leave nfstest in KDevOps and don't bother putting in a cthon workflow, we get about the same coverage, don't we? Or better. I mean, we cover the stuff that cthon covered, right?
Pretty much, but still, I mean, since cthon it's easy to run and it's it doesn't take that long. We still have found, well, not lately, but we still have found a few issues that cthon uncovered that nfstest didn't, right? So
okay,
but I don't know. It's been a lot of I don't know how long since that happened, right? So I don't know if it's still relevant. But I think with the XFS test, the problem with that XFS test is that it just takes forever, right? Especially on a virtual environment like Bakeathon. So
yeah, it can. And I enabled, of course, KSAN and LockDep, which slows things down by like 4x.
Yeah, I ran into that. I was testing. So when I started testing your branch, I created a config that matches the way KDevOps is looking for configs. And then at some point later, you committed your own config and it had KASAN. And
Sorry.
No, that's fine. But I just noticed
bad.
like my test went from like taking about 3 hours to run to taking like 8-9 hours. And actually that's when I dug in and I found if you actually create a file called config-kdevops, that is like KDevOps will look for that first over everything else. So that solved my issue. But yeah,
Yeah,
I noticed
I'm removing those. I should not have committed those. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, that's fine.
Um,
On the Connectathon thing, though, like if there's somebody that was interested in contributing to KDevOps and they want, I mean, it would be a good exercise for learning how to add a workflow. But yeah, I thought about adding it and it didn't
Are you
really
looking at me?
me.
Are you looking at me? I got, yeah, just I'll look into it. But so it is worth it. But is that what we're to bring
Yeah,
it
I'm
with
not
you, all the testing? Yeah, I'm not sure
I
either.
think we're on the cusp of it being worth it.
Right, yeah, I know. I know.
I don't know.
So what we can do is we can kind of look through the CTHON. I mean, most of the tests I think are covered by NFS test, but we can look through whatever tests that they do and perhaps are not in NFS test and just add a test case for it, you know, like as a part of one thing that is missing, but that I know for sure that NFS test doesn't do is CTHON's compile test, right?
Mhm.
So something
That's
that
exactly right, yeah.
generates, you know, a bunch of requests at a time. You know, it's kind of just your standard, you know, multiple reads. You know, probably not multiple, right? Well, maybe I forget, you know, what it does, but that's not something that that we do in NFS test because, as Jorge said, it's protocol compliance, right? So, and you know, make it's more of just using it, right? But making sure that stuff works. So I'm not sure what kind of test case we would add for NFS test to, you know, say, well, can you open multiple files and, you know, read and write at the same time, and what do you check, right? You know, how is it supposed to behave, right? It's
Build
supposed
me
to
a
just
kernel.
work.
How do you debug it? Yeah, how do you debug it? You know,
Or
Right.
could
Anyway,
something like
so-
that move into XFS tests? In the
Huh?
like
Excuse me?
NFS section, could we just put that in XFS tests?
Mhm.
And then it's at least somewhere, even if it doesn't apply to NFS test.
Right,
Yeah,
but that's a case for just adding it as a flow, you know, since it doesn't
give
take
it
that
a
long.
shot. Well, if it's added to XFS test, then it will be run as part of KDevOps. I think that's an interesting idea. You should try it and see what happens.
Yeah, and also the difference, going back to the CTON and NFS test, I think the big difference is that CTON is compiled, right? So basically it's a lot faster than Python. And some of the bugs that you can uncover with that is that timing issues, right? That could happen with something that is faster to execute than Python. So there are a few bugs that we haven't uncovered, like or that it could take a lot of tries in order to get them to fail or to reproduce. Tigran?
But there's a couple of things which already exist, so maybe you don't need to reinvent. We use FIO and MD bench, MD test, which is part of this MPI IO testing, which is pretty simple to start multiple read writes, and the FIO is just a single command line to start a multiple read writes. So this kind of workloads, well, unless you really want to have it differently part of your suite, so there are tools which are already doing this, and there might be the effort to bring it into XFS is much higher than just use whatever. FIO, you can simulate a lot of workloads where you read, seek, jump, read, seek, jump based on some access profile. So we use this to simulate our user applications because we cannot always run the same workload as users do, but we can pretty close come to their parallel IO workloads with the FIO and MD test. So this is maybe something which can be included, or I don't know, either linked in or just run internally?
So XFS test does run FSX, which gives you that kind of stressful. It runs it in several different of the generic tests. I've run FIO separately. Maybe that's something we could think of adding somewhere. But to me, FIO is more of a performance test rather than a functionality test. It measures performance actually to quite a degree of detail. So that's how I use it.
Right.
And,
It depends what you want to
KDevOps
achieve with it.
Yeah, KDevOps is virtualized all to hell. So it's not going to be performant, and it's not going to give you any real repeatable performance results. So I don't. I'm not sure.
saying of the performance, but it creates the same workload. But in general, so if you run, this is
But I
another
think
thing
we got
which we.
that. I think we've got that in
okay.
test.
The other thing about the virtualized environment, so all race conditions and everything, you can find only when you run on the real hardware, because independent how good you virtualize, it's not comparable if you have a machine with 128 cores or you have a laptop with 4 cores and have 128 virtual machines on it. So it's completely different behavior.
So I've run KDevOps on a 160 core system, and you can actually you can create guests that have 16 CPUs.
Right. So
yeah. So we
if
do
you
that,
have
and also
capable hardware, then yes, of course.
Yes, and then it also you don't have to do local virtualization. You can use a cloud, so you can spin up these test systems in a cloud where you're actually renting some real hardware for a little while, or you're renting some really big iron. So you can do it with KDevOps. It costs dollars though. I think XFS test also runs dbench. But yeah, those are useful for stress and timing, like you said. But the performance tests, it's not going to be good for. So we're past. We're well past 3 o'clock. Maybe we should close. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for a very useful conversation.
Yeah. Thank you
Stop
for
the
all the work.
recording right now.